From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
New statewide polling just released shows Governor Whitmer maintaining a strong approval rating in her final months in office.
Michigan voters are deeply frustrated with the country's two-party system.
And increasingly anxious about the economy. Today, we check in again with the pollster Richard Schuba about what his new numbers can tell us about Michigan voters heading into the 2026 election. He is the founder of the Glenn Gariff Group. Richard, hello.
Hi there.
Hey there. Good to be back.
So good to have you. So let's start with these numbers. Governor Whitmer, you have found her approval numbers unusually strong for a second-term governor. What explains her political durability?
Well, the numbers we have her at are her job approval continues to be above 52%. And it has been above 52% since, I'd say, the winter of 2023. And I think there's a lot of explanations. I think the simplest one is Gretchen Whitmer really resonates with female voters. Her job approval is 57% amongst women. It's only 47% amongst men. And we underestimate the differences she has brought to the state as a female governor. And it's resonated with those female voters. I think one of the big things about her is she's not picking fights the way typical politicians do. She'll tell you where she stands. She pursues issues that are important to her, but she doesn't denigrate people and she doesn't attack people. And that's something we've seen over the years that voters really like. And I think it's made a big difference for her numbers.
How much do you think that policy outcomes play into this versus personality and leadership style?
I think a lot of it in these numbers is personality and leadership style. I mean, the reality is people like Gretchen Whitmer. She is the classic Michigander, slightly foul-mouthed, great sense of humor, the person you want to have a beer with. I mean, that's a Michigander to their core, it seems, and she reflects that. People like that. As governor, she's broken this new style of communicating directly with people via social media. And she's very good at it. And in fact, I think she sets the standard for what we'll see coming down the road from other elected leaders.
Folks like Gavin Newsom, Pritzker in Illinois, they get a lot of attention because they are bomb throwers. Do you think those who are working on compromise are getting as much national attention right now?
No, they're not. And it's simply because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. She's not being the squeaky wheel. She's actually getting things for Michigan. And, we've still got 6 months to go in her tenure, but it really is quite amazing to watch how unpopular Donald Trump is, particularly with Democrats. And yet she has managed to find a way to not only get things from him, but frankly, have more of an audience with him than many Republican officials do. Mm-hmm. It's pretty stark to watch, how much she has put herself on the line on behalf of Michigan to get things like Selfridge. That may be one of her greatest accomplishments.
And do all that and still have high approval ratings in Michigan amongst her base.
Voters tell us over and over and over they want their elected leaders to compromise. Mm-hmm. It's like, find some middle ground, find a way to work together. She's kind of showing there is a path towards that. And voters, they crave it. They just crave both sides of the aisle, acting like adults, trying to get something done.
We've talked about this the last time you were on the show. You polled to see also just how Michiganders rated themselves against other states. You found that we think we're better off as a state than we actually are. You found similar data again. Explain.
Yeah, last time we asked voters, we asked them on a series of metrics, where does Michigan rank 1 to 50? And we found that on every single metric, they were ranking Michigan from 25 to 28, right in the middle, perfectly average. So we wanted to come back to that. And we asked voters specifically, we said, this is where Michigan ranks. And the perfect example I use is, in 2000, Michigan ranked 16th in per capita income. In 25 years, we have fallen to 39th. No state has fallen more over the past 25 years. Were you aware of that? And we asked that on per capita income, on fourth grade reading scores, and on the state's unemployment rate. And voters just don't know about these things. A majority of voters were not aware of any of them, and the lowest was on per capita income. Only 24% of voters said they were aware of Michigan's per capita income decline. And yet here we are in this affordability crisis. And part of the conversation needs to be if the nation's having an affordability crisis, well, it's exacerbated in Michigan because we're having a per capita income crisis. Our jobs are just not paying the way jobs are paying in other states because we have old school manufacturing jobs that just don't pay the same anymore. And other states are bypassing us. In fact, they're flying past us. And on this trajectory we're on, Michigan isn't just going to be 39th, 40th. We're going to be 48th because there's no end to the drop in sight. And we wanted to see if voters understood that, and they don't. They haven't even heard this information.
So why that disconnect? Why do people not see where the data says we are in relation to other states?
Well, I think they feel it, but they just don't know it because nobody's telling them, frankly. And to be perfectly blunt, neither party, neither side of the aisle has an interest in making sure the voters know this information because it happened on both of their watches. We've had Republican administrations, we've had Democratic administrations, and these declines have happened over both of them. And it's really hard, in a political environment where it's all about short-term gain. One party can't blame the other because they were there for part of it and they were leading for part of it. So I think both sides just don't want to talk about it. And so it's not part of the conversation.
Is there something culturally or politically unique about how Michigan voters perceive our state?
Well, Michigan is different. And this is how. We rank number 2 in the country in the percentage of people who were born here and have stayed here. We're only behind Louisiana, very narrowly, for their number 1 spot. And so Michiganders really stay in Michigan, at least the ones who are here. So we have this sense of ourselves, but we don't have a bigger sense necessarily of how we compare against everyone else. And I think that's hurting us.
Who's the right messenger to tell this to the public?
Frankly, everybody. It's everybody's responsibility who's in a position of leadership, whether you're not just elected officials. I mean, we shouldn't count on elected officials to tell us things are good or things are bad. We should be counting on the leaders of our institutions, the leaders of our schools, the leaders of business, the leaders of labor. Across the board, everyone who is in a position of leadership has a responsibility to say, hold it. We've got a problem here, particularly, on things like we're 44th in the nation in fourth grade reading scores. We are dramatically dropping in per capita income. Those are 2 really big signals that something is off. And it's not one party that's to blame. It's not one elected leader that's to blame. It's, Michigan is a very purple state. And one of the challenges of being a purple state is every election we elect another party and we swing in a new direction. Red states, blue states have much more consistency than Michigan because they tend to have the same party leading them. Now, they may be leading them in the wrong direction, but it's a consistent leadership. There isn't this snapping back and forth of policies. And I think that's a discussion Michigan really needs to have, whether or not we can really tolerate, just changing direction constantly. And education is the perfect example. Every time Democrats or Republicans take control, we change our education policies. I think the education community will tell you a little consistency is going to help a lot to see what works and what doesn't work.
We're speaking with pollster Richard Schuba. New numbers just out this week about the state of our state. Richard, you found some common ground among voters. Nearly 70% overwhelmingly believe that our two-party political system does not serve America well. And yet we just saw last week Mike Duggan, running as an independent, drop out of the race for governor. What should we make of these two things in tandem?
Well, these numbers are interesting because we see a real difference by age in these numbers of voters who don't think the two-party system serves the country well. Younger voters, voters under 50, drastically do not think that the parties serve the country well. Older voters are more likely to think they do. Now, granted, I'm not going to say it's great. Those voters still were on the negative side, but it's the young ones that are really driving these numbers. And, you bring up Mike Duggan dropping out as an independent. I think if there is one thing that the Duggan candidacy could do for Michigan now, it's for all of us to have a conversation about how all the laws, the entire political process is stacked to the parties. They control the rulemaking, and boy, they control the rulemaking. And a perfect example of this is if you are an independent candidate, for example, if Mike Duggan had made the ballot, his name would have been at the very bottom of the ballot because Michigan law says that when you look at that governor's race, the party that controls the Secretary of State's office gets the top candidate, listing. Well, in a lot of other states, they just rotate. In a lot of other races, those names are rotated. And that's just a bias in the system. Parties have infrastructure. Voters have a history. All their lives, they voted for either a Republican or a Democrat. It's really hard for an independent to break through because you have to break a voter's lifetime pattern of voting for one side or the other. If there were a third option or multiple options, it'd take us a little while. I mean, history, it takes a while to break history. And so I think one of the things here, voters are not happy, but yet they just keep falling in the same pattern of going to their corners and voting Republican or Democrat.
And that includes voters who are independent, that they might describe themselves as independent, but behaviorally at the ballot box, they're partisan.
That's right. They have a history of leaning one way or the other. I think there's a very small group of people that are truly hardcore independents, as we think of them, that will flip back and forth. Most of those independents, they are either softer Republicans, softer Democrats. And part of that reason, frankly, is there are a lot of areas in this state that are controlled by one party or the other. So you don't often have competitive races. For example, there aren't a lot of competitive Democrats in rural areas. There aren't many competitive Republicans in urban areas. So all those people in those areas that might be independents, well, if you really want your vote to count, you don't have many options. So you learn to vote for the party that controls that area. I think what this state, this country could really use is more competitiveness amongst not just the parties, but amongst the options.
Finally, let's turn to the economy. Inflation fears in your polling are now at the highest level in 3 years. Michigan voters, though, appear split on whether the state is on the right track overall, but more pessimistic about the economy specifically. What does that tell you?
Well, I think this tells us what we all know. We're seeing massive red flags in how voters are viewing the economy. And it's because those gas prices are nearly $5 a gallon.
Mm-hmm.
It is just driving, as I like to say, gas prices have thrown gas on the fire of inflation.
Ba-dum-bum.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way around it. Voters are angry over this. And, we have the national right track, wrong track in Michigan. Only 28% of voters in Michigan think the nation's on the right track. And we always talk about independence. That's only 17.7% of the independents who think that. These are really not good signs for the economy. 60% of voters now see the national economy as weakening versus growing. And 41.8% of them expect a recession in the next year. But I think the number that really stands out here, there's two of them. 49% of voters think inflation's going to get worse in the next year. As you said, the highest number since November 23. But the other question we ask is, are good paying jobs available for anyone who wants them? And that number is now at the lowest level since we started asking that question. It's only at 46.8. And just a year ago, in January of 25, it was at 66%. And it has been a steady decline in every survey we've asked this question. So you have this situation where voters are furious over inflation. They expect inflation to get worse. They see a weakened economy. And now on top of that, they're seeing good paying jobs less and less available.
And all of this heading into an incredibly consequential election 2026.
It sure is. And if I'm the incumbent party, those are not numbers I'd want to be seeing right now. Those are very difficult numbers for Republicans.
That is Richard Schuba. He is founder of Glengarriff Group, and he brings us his latest polling for the Detroit Regional Chamber being released during this year's Mackinac Policy Conference. Richard, as always, thank you so much for talking us through this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that is It's Just Politics for today. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.